talk about. There's been an evolution of learning for AIML, and it falls into two categories: unsupervised learning and supervised learning. Dina mentioned a little bit about this earlier. So, unsupervised and supervised learning are terms from the field of pattern recognition, and it basically means whether you need a teacher or not in the process of training. So, like your example, I always think of the kid going out and learning language on the street is sort of unsupervised learning versus the kid going to school and learning language in school is supervised learning. And then, if the kid learns something on the street and comes back and says, "Daddy, today I heard that the Indianapolis Speedway is at the North Pole," you can act as the teacher or supervisor and correct that. But unsupervised learning has been, I should say supervised, that's a joke. Sorry about that. Supervised learning requires a teacher. Unsupervised learning does not require a teacher. So over the years, we've trained the bot in different ways. At first, it was a simple process of reading the transcripts from conversations that people had with the bot and looking for places in those transcripts where the bot gave the wrong answer or a vague answer, and then retraining the bot to give a better response to that type of input. And of course, as the popularity of the bots grew, the number of transcripts became very large, and it was humanly impossible to read all the transcripts even if you wanted to. So we created an algorithm called targeting, which is a way of basically automatically scanning through the transcripts and looking for those places. Now, how do you know that the bot gave the wrong answer? All we do is look for patterns which have wildcards in them. So if the person chatting with the bot said something which matched a wildcard pattern, that means that there could have been a more specific pattern for that input. And it's likely that there could be a better response too. So by using the targeting algorithm, we can scan through hundreds or thousands of conversation logs, look for places where the bot gave the wrong or vague answer, and then present those to the bot master in a convenient ranked format. And it turns out that there's a zips distribution of these things too, which means there's always going to be one pattern which has one pattern which is activated most often, giving vague responses. And then when the bot master sees those patterns, he can simply click on them and view all of the actual inputs which activate those patterns, and then select from those examples to create more specific responses. The next stage in supervised learning was the creation of the superbot. And the superbot is basically a kind of blank ALICE brain. So remember, the AIML language has patterns and templates. Well, by looking at all of the history of conversation logs, it's pretty easy to figure out which are the top 10,000 most activated patterns. And then we can, if somebody wants to create a new bot which has a completely different personality from the original ALICE, we can give them those top 10,000 patterns and say, okay, you fill in the answers and you'll have a completely unique bot. Well, it turns out that in the ALICE brain, there are basically two different types of AIML categories. One is called reductions, AIML reductions. And what that refers to is things like synonyms. So think of all the different ways of saying the word hello. Hi, howdy, hi there, etc. Basically, each one of those has an AIML category which links it to the input hello. So for the most part, the AIML reductions are the same for any English language block. Most of the reductions are reusable blocks. That's how I should say that. And so the if you think of the superbot as containing 10,000 blank responses, about half of them are reduction categories, so they don't really have to be blank. They don't have to be rewritten every time for every bot. Now, on the other hand, we've had unsupervised learning, where there's no teacher required. And the general problem with unsupervised learning is that the bot learns a lot of garbage or crap. You know, there's just people on the internet can't be trusted to teach the bot accurate information for the most part. But you know, so we've looked carefully at technologies for creating bot content where some sort of unsupervised learning can be used and create the content more efficiently. I guess what I should say about this also is that if you look back at the original ALICE bot, let's say the first 25,000 to 40,000 categories of the ALICE bot probably took me about 4 years to write by hand every one. If you printed it all out, it's like the equivalent of an 800-page novel. We've identified a phenomenon that we call bot fever. And bot fever means that someone will chat with the ALICE bot or one of our other bots and have a very good impression of it, and then think, well, I'd really like to have something like that on my website to talk about my stuff. But they don't realize that there's that 4 years of work required to create the original bot content. And so there's kind of a mismatch of expectations. They have a feverish idea that there should be some sort of magic machine where we can put their website into it, turn the crank, and a nice bot comes out. So each of these successive technologies that I've talked about has been an attempt to try to reduce the amount of time needed to create an all-original bot. So starting from 4 years with the 4 years from the training from dialogue, I don't know, maybe down to this tool. The targeting tool tends to be used in conjunction with other tools, so it's hard to say how much time would be required creating a bot solely using the targeting tool. But it's a significant savings over training from the dialogue. And then the superbot, 10,000. The reason I picked 10,000 is that 10,000 seems to be about the minimum threshold required number of responses to have a sort of believable bot that's, you know, a level or two above basic realizable. And if you think of a skilled AIML bot master being able to write one AIML category per minute, which is not to say that every category takes 1 minute. Some of them might take 20 or 30 minutes to write one. Others of them you could probably do 20 or 30 in 1 minute by some of the cut and paste method. But on average, let's say 1 minute per category. 10,000 minutes equals about 1 week of 24/7 activity. So realistically, we're looking at maybe 2 or 3 months of 2 or 3 people working more or less full-time on creating a bot using the superbot. One of the first things that we did with Pandorabots was to create something called Pandora Writer, which can turn transcripts into AIML. And we had the idea that it would be nice to be able to upload transcripts of TV shows and instant messaging